many jumps does it take to beat Sonic Adventure? Well, the answer might just shock you. Or not, I don't really know. Either way, I think it resulted in a fun journey. Before we get started with that, let's first make sure we're on the same page. For this challenge, I just went through Sonic's story, none of the other characters. Also, a jump is where I press the A button and Sonic jumps. That's it. Springs, damage boost, basically anything else is fair game. Also, I'm playing on the PC version of the game, but I downloaded mods, currently shown on screen, to freshen up the experience. They basically just improve the lighting and the UI, and in general make it closer to the Dreamcast version. That said, let's get this going. Right out of the gate, we have a fight against Chaos Zero. This battle is meant to teach the player how to use this game's new feature, which is jump attacks. Which unfortunately means that nothing else will work for damage. We can't roll through him. The arena is empty and circular, so we can't even get into the air by moving fast. As such, this fight takes just 3 jumps to complete. It's unfortunate to hit such roadblocks so early, but everything going forward leaves plenty of room for creativity. Like for example, Emerald Coast, Sonic's first action stage. Like every other action stage we'll have to traverse, we simply need to get to the end. How we do that is up to us. It starts quite open, letting Sonic stretch his little hedgehog legs. You're not really expected to do any platforming until after the encounter with the killer whale. After heading up the rocks with these very generously placed springs, we have a few gaps in the path. Thankfully, Sonic can get across them by just rolling or running fast. Now for this section, we need to take the upper path, which leads to some more handy springs that propel Sonic past an otherwise impassable little pond. Then after a loop, we're expected to go up a ramp, jump up a few steps, then go back down the other ramp. Instead, we can launch ourselves using a well-placed spin dash to reach the next island, without doing any of that. Dashing off of ramps and inclines is going to be like our main way to obtain height without actually jumping. Afterwards, the rest of the way can be done, as intended, jumpless. Next, we're supposed to head to Mystic Ruins, but first let's get the Lightspeed Dash a little early. To do that, we'll need to head this way and use the spin dash to clip through the invisible barrier, and then grab Mr. Bobsworth, as famously seen in my glitch video, to clip through the car into the sewer. Down here, despite the appearance of a ramp, this ramp doesn't actually give us anywhere near enough height with a spin dash. Since there's no other way to get up to the upgrade, we have to use one jump to get to the Lightspeed Dash, which is going to be very useful going forward. Also, with that, we'll go back to the hotel and use the Lightspeed Dash to get the Crystal Ring, which cuts the charge time in half, which is very useful. That done, I went to the station and took the train to Mystic Ruins. Here, near Tails' workshop, we have a fight against Eggman's Egg Hornet. For some reason, he likes to take his airborne vehicle and slam it to the ground, allowing us to damage it without jumping. How thoughtful. With that, we could beat him pretty easily. Afterwards, we can carry the Wind Key to this windy cave to unlock Windy Valley, our next action stage. This one starts out with a bigger focus on platforming, presenting a number of flying enemies, floating platforms, that sort of thing. Regardless, there are more than enough ledges to spin dash launch ourselves with to get to the second act without jumping. Unfortunately, said act is inside of a tornado, which is essentially a giant cylinder that you're supposed to go up, and the game forces you to use jump panels. I tried spin dashing or even light speed launching using some rings, which is a little tricky, but no dice. None of that worked. There's 5 jump panels in total, but the 5th can be ignored with a little help from a preloaded Lightspeed Dash for a total of 4 jumps. Afterwards, we have a series of set pieces that can be done without ever needing to leave the ground, meaning we can just go to the very end, no problem. After Windy Valley is when we're supposed to get the Lightspeed Shoes, which changes it to nighttime, opening up the casino area. Since I don't want to go through that again, which would cost a jump, and also having the Lightspeed Dash early saves the jump, we can instead take Mr. Bobsworth and do a glitch to get into the casino area. This can be done by bringing him to the train station, placing him around here, and then using him to clip through the wall. Just an important note, doing this without jumping makes it very easy to fall off the bit of out of bounds floor that we want to land on, which would then get us into a very red infinite death loop, because this game is a bit weird. But if we do it normally, we can clip through, get to Casinopolis as intended, and then it's time to gamble, sorta. So this stage isn't too bad. I've never been a fan of it while playing normally, but for this challenge, it's fun because the pinball machine doesn't require any jumps at all. As for the sewers, if you go down there, I didn't check everything, but it seems pretty accessible. It would be pretty hard to get a lot of the ring capsules without jumping, but I suppose you could use a lot of light speed dashes. Either way, you can get a lot of rings from just the pinball machines, so that's no problem. When it comes time to deposit our rings, this is a huge difference between the Dreamcast and GameCube/PC versions. In the Dreamcast version, which is technically what I'm playing on, there is a ramp up to the ring extractor button. In the GameCube version, the ramp was changed to steps. I tried to see if I could spin dash launch up them, but I had no luck. As such, no jumps are needed for Casinopolis for this challenge run, but it would cost one if I was on the GameCube version. From there, the game directs us back to the Mystic Ruins, into a newly opened path. The rubble is a bit annoying, but you can toss the ice key and then spin dash launch using parts of the rubble to get past. We can also launch ourselves up out of the pool of water. The real obstacle is getting onto the ladder that leads to Ice Cap. Sonic can't mount a ladder while in the usual falling state. He needs to either jump or jump attack onto the ladder. I initially thought this meant that we were forced to use a jump, but upon revisiting, I realized that you can just barely get some height by spin dashing against the wall, and then attack mid-air to grab onto the ladder. The attack part of a jump attack isn't a jump, so this is totally fine. Now that we're into Ice Cap, for the first part we're expected to navigate up the slope through a tunnel that brings us back to a rocket across the slope to the next section. I don't want to do any of that. Instead, spin dash launching gets us up to the rocket for a jumpless and speedy skip. Now, for this room, it's a doozy. If done intended, we are to go down and then platform all the way up using icicles, each requiring a jump to get off of. Then once at the top, a multi-step jump pad is required to knock down a giant icicle, which opens the gate forward. That would be a lot of jumps. Instead, I found that it's possible to spin dash across to this platform, and then bounce up to here. After activating the temporary ice path, we can jump and attack towards the door, which, if timed properly, lets Sonic just clip right through. But that didn't feel right. I feared that the jump was required until I truly accepted the game's jank, and I just yoked myself up and over the wall, allowing me to bypass the gates and jump entirely. Now, after that, the snowboarding is, snowboring, also jumpless. After exiting that stage, we have a fight against Knuckles. Turns out he is no Idris Elba. We really just gotta lightly roll into him a few times and we will win. The thing is that right after that, we find ourselves fighting Chaos 4, which is by far this run's hardest boss. Normally, you would simply jump from lily pad to lily pad until Chaos opens themselves up to a jump attack. It also takes place over water, but it works more like quicksand, meaning you can actually repeatedly jump out of the water. Perhaps you're seeing an issue here. To sum up my findings from about 2 hours of attempts, it is possible to beat Chaos 4 without jumping. It's just extremely tedious and very luck dependent. So when Chaos 4 is open to being attacked, you can actually damage him by just spinning through him, but the problem is surviving long enough to do that. Since we can't jump out of the quicksand like water, we are always about a second or so away from being damaged and getting killed. The lily pads do help us at first, but one of Chaos's actions is to dive and make them sink for a while. It's really hard, if not impossible, to get back onto the lily pad simply by dashing into it because it's just too high up. Of course, you can get onto it as it resurfaces, but it takes so long that you're likely to get hit by Chaos or take damage from the water, knocking you aside, so the lily pads are not really reliable. All that said, I was able to juggle my rings and time it out properly, and eventually beat Chaos 4 jumpless, which felt like a huge achievement. After that, we have Sky Chase Act 1, which is an on-rails shooter, so jumping isn't even a mechanic. No worries here. From there, we stop by the casino area of Station and Square to meet Amy.
See you later, stinky.
So let's go into there, I guess. Right out of the gates, we need to explode one of the robots in its car, which we can do with a spin. It's pretty fickle when this does work, but it does. Afterwards, we need to get into the car. To do this, we have to press the A button, which it's a scripted action. It technically isn't a jump, but it looks like a jump and feels like one, so I'm counting it as a jump. The race itself doesn't require any jumps. There's ramps to get us past any open air. Now for the second part, it starts off fine, but this part with a pit of water was quite worrying. Luckily, one of those weird looking enemies will actually chase Sonic into the water, and then we can use them to damage boost ourselves up and out. After that, everything else is fine and doable as normal until we get to this part with the floating platforms. I couldn't quite get high enough with the nearby ramp. I didn't want to jump. I eventually tried lightspeed dashing into this bit of rings, and it looked like it wouldn't work, but it just sort of did.
Ready, go.
I'm not going to complain. The final obstacle is to actually get onto the capsule, which is doable using the nearby enemies, which means this whole level is just a single jump. Nice. Our next stage is none other than Speed Highway, which immediately presents us with a roadblock. Specifically, this moving platform. It will only move if you're touching the yellow part, and the red part is just tall enough to actually stop Sonic from rolling or walking over it. I did come up with a strat though, which was to start the platform, then use a lightspeed dash while the platform was moving through some rings to boost Sonic just high enough to get onto the ledge. It felt really precise, but I got it on one of my first tries, so I was really happy about that. A bit later, a similar issue arose when I tried to get onto this rotating elevator, but luckily another lightspeed dash worked. For most of the level, it's pretty much just one set piece after another. The real challenge comes near the end, where we're expected to get up onto the capsule inside of this building. Leading up to the capsule, there's actually a spring and a fountain, which for some reason can get you enough height and distance to boost you up onto the roof. With that, we can spin dash launch up over the building and then fall down through the out of bounds part of the roof directly onto the button, which means the whole level is jumpless. Nice. Afterwards, we head into the Mystic Ruins yet again, grabbing our third and final upgrade called the Ancient Light, which allows us to use the lightspeed dash through enemies. That also unlocks the entrance to Red Mountain, the most tedious level so far. It offers a lot of floating platforms and places to follow your doom, but there are also a lot of springs, rockets, monkey bars to traverse, and zip lines. I focused on using every spring possible and making the most out of the height that the rockets gave me. For the monkey bars, it seems that Sonic can't simply dismount while sort of hanging still, but he can drop by pressing B while moving, so that's that. And then for the zip lines, I was able to get onto every single one of them without jumping. I also used lightspeed dashes through rings and enemies wherever possible, and a few choice spin dash launches with steep terrain. The biggest issue I had was with this set of rotating mesh platforms that you have to traverse upwards with. The whole level is jumpless, it just took a lot of time and effort.
Go! Ready, go! Go!
After that, we have Sky Chase Act 2, which yet again doesn't allow for jumping. It's a bit boring, but that's besides the point. That done, we find ourselves on the egg carrier, which we can easily navigate on foot. If we ever need to get anywhere, we can literally just spin dash launch ourselves up to our destination. The next stage is, unfortunately, Sky Deck. This is the least accessible level in the entire game, as you start by getting shotgunned into a pillar that Sonic can sidle around, which also requires a jump to get off of. It's a bit of a spoiler, but the entirety of Act 1 of Skydeck is a huge pain, so while I will show my actual gameplay, I'll also show angles of the level using a debug mod for a better cam for extra context. Also, I should know that it was around this time that I finally enabled a cheat to have infinite lives, because honestly, the life system is pointless and it was just getting in the way of innovation and theory crafting. So getting off the pillar is one jump no matter what. Next, as you traverse the bridge, the nearby cannons will shoot out sections one at a time. These explosions always happen in the same order. Also, the explosions harmlessly propel Sonic up and forward, which you can use to get across all of the barriers and actually the whole bridge. You could also lightspeed dash through the rings or the enemies, but doing it on the enemies is super inconsistent because Sonic will go at them at seemingly a random order and sometimes just miss entirely. So from this point, we can go up the ladder, which leads to a spring, and then 3 rotating pillars. The alternative route is to go back using the enemies, which is hard to do with just lightspeed dashes, go across 3 different rotating pillars, and then up a ladder and across the monkey bars, which the whole thing would add unnecessary jumps, so I just stuck with the first standard path. I found that the most efficient way up was to charge up a lightspeed dash, then use a jump onto the ladder, and then release the lightspeed dash, and then immediately cancel it to get Sonic off of the ladder without jumping. This is pretty consistent because there's only ever one enemy within range. Now, from here we don't have a lot of room to work with, so I think it's best to just take the spring and then jump from pillar 1 to pillar 3, and then jump off to head to the next section. Speaking of, this section has 2 routes. There's the standard one and then the extra credit route, which requires us to jump attack our way to the right, jump to grab a rotating hook, which we then have to jump off of to get to a rocket that propels us forward. Instead, you could just take the boost panel forward and then use a single jump to get off the rotating pillar. If you're curious, you cannot lightspeed dash off of a pillar. Finally, we have one last section where we must navigate up and around 4 giant pillars and then activate a rocket which destroys the cannon, which teleports us to Act 2 of the level. From this checkpoint, we have to clear all the rings except just the one in front of the ladder. We then lightspeed dash onto the ladder to mount it. At the top, we jump off the ladder directly onto the monkey bars. Continue forward until the part of the monkey bars detaches, and then carefully press B to drop down onto the middle level, and then lightspeed across using the enemies to reach the middle tier walkway leading to pillar 2. Now, you need to dash to the right, charge a lightspeed dash, and then jump onto the ladder. At the top of the ladder, since we don't want to jump or get stuck onto the pillar, we can actually release the lightspeed dash, and if we're in the right spot, we'll actually bonk against the pillar. And if Sonic bonks, then he won't grab it, allowing you to narrowly walk around the pillar without being on it. Exiting the pillar's grab hitbox actually propels Sonic up and away, which isn't a jump, but it is quite useful. At pillar 3, we need to drop down to the mid-tier walkway leading to pillar 4. Then, at pillar 4, charge the lightspeed dash, drop onto the ladder to the left, and then bonk to walk around to this ladder where you have a very nice set of circumstances. You can charge up a lightspeed dash and then walk away from the pillar, which has its grab hitbox pushing you away, which also counts as pushing you up into the air onto the ladder directly. Then you just need to release your lightspeed dash at the very top to bonk and then walk around and hit the rocket. With that route, I believe that you can complete Act 1 in just 7 jumps. I spent a little too much time on this one part of this one level. Moving on, we have 2/3 of the level to go. Thankfully, from here on out, there is more ground to work with and a lot of space for flexibility. As we move across the deck, the wind will occasionally fling Sonic across the way, but this never caused me any issues. With a bunch of spin dashes, you can easily get to the next checkpoint. Now, this section is split into 3 lanes, each lane having multiple segments. Some segments are always stable, some have an elevator that opens up and spawns jets, and others will fall out as you get to them. I was really worried because this looked nigh impossible. I eventually figured a way across by going very slow and very methodically. I got as far as I could, and when I couldn't go farther, I actually realized that the little platforms, it's hard to describe, on the adjacent sections actually allow you to spin dash launch into the air. Does that make sense? Hopefully you can see what I mean. But yeah, Act 2 can be done jumpless. As for Act 3 of Skydeck, it expects you to navigate deeper into the area with some platforming, at which point Eggman rotates the entire section of the ship, causing you to then navigate upwards. Pretty much all of the horizontal sections platforming can be ignored by spin dash launching up onto the slanted walls that circle the area. It doesn't matter really where, but once you get to a certain point, Eggman will just make the place turn, so we just need to get to that point. Then we drop down and start the vertical platforming, which thankfully can be done entirely without jumping because you have a bunch of springs that send you up and monkey bars that you can get off of with the press of the B button. The real challenge is actually getting onto the actual capsule at the end. I tried approaching it from behind, maybe I could sneak up on it, but the camera change and angles makes this very difficult. What eventually worked was navigating atop the tunnel and then just sort of throwing myself over onto the button.
Yes!
Our reward for beating that level is to beat up E102 Gamma, which is both easy and jumpless, much like the Knuckles fight. As for the fight against Chaos 6, it's also quite easy. All we need to do is wait for Eggman to drop some of those ice bombs, disable them by spinning into them, we could pick them up and throw them at Chaos, which freezes Chaos, and then just roll into him to damage him. Rinse, repeat, and we're done. Not bad. Our next stage is Lost World, where we delve into the mystical ruin, or at least one of them. It starts out fairly simple. We have a bunch of tunnels to speed down, and any breaks in the path can just be bypassed with light speed dashes. After that, things get very interesting once we enter into the Stone Snake water room. The intended route through this room is to platform around, hit all of the 3 glowy buttons to unlock the door, while using the 3 water raising buttons to bring the snake up, who allows you to get across the room. That would be way too many jumps, so the next best method I could find was to actually the go-to skip for speedruns. The idea is that you spin dash jump onto Mr. Snake, and then do another spin dash launch, which gets you high enough to access the door. While that is cool and efficient, it still costs 2 jumps, so I really wanted to figure a better way. Turns out, there is a better way, just don't jump. In other words, you can actually get onto the first platform by lightspeed dashing from here. It reaches, somehow. Then you can hit the button by spin dashing into it. This doesn't actually launch you, or give you any height or anything, but sometimes the button gets pressed. Now, wait for Mr. Snake to go past you and then dash off the platform at this angle. Then as he circles the room, you want to charge a spin dash and then release somewhere around here, which should target these boxes, and then raise the water again. Now, getting back onto Mr. Snake from here is a bit trickier because he's a bit higher than before, relatively, and this platform has a little ledge. Still, it is possible, just be careful. Again, charge a lightspeed dash and release from around here to target more boxes, this time on the platform right near the exit. You might need to do 1 dash to take out the enemy and then another to actually target the rings, but once you do that, we're up right next to the exit. The thing is, the exit is closed because we haven't pressed any of the required buttons. Still, we can actually clip through because it's weird. For this game, for some amount of frames after unpausing the game, certain objects like doors don't have any collision. With that, we can just clip right through. After that, we find another tricky room just a few moments after passing through the checkpoint. I assume that it's supposed to be challenging because of the limited visibility, hence the mirrors you gotta light up, but I found the real challenge being just platforming. By dashing, you can get to this block pretty easily, but getting further without jumping seems impossible. The next enemy, set of rings, or item capsule is just too far away. I just couldn't find anything usable, so I had to do 1 jump to get through here. Everything was going swimmingly, and I was rolling and rolling until this room. It's another that appeared very rough, but the solution was actually fairly simple. From around here, I used a light speed dash to target these boxes and get us up onto this platform. Then I very carefully rolled off and onto the button. That took a lot of tries, not gonna lie. We need to then press the button more than once to get the nearby panels to activate, but you can actually do this by carefully walking to the edge of the button to get off its press trigger without actually dropping down. Next, we just have to dash towards the panels to get us onto the wall. Now that we have our gravity turned around, we can actually just go as high as possible and then dash up and to the right, which is more than enough height to get us to this checkpoint. Then a careful dash gets us this way into this tunnel that leads to the end of the level. Afterwards, we head back onto the egg carrier. We need to get up to this spot and do a little puzzle to unlock our final level, Final Egg. It starts out fine. We can dash, destroy, and fumble our way through all of the lasers and enemies. On this room, a little bit of light speed dashes on the enemies gets us up to here and onto the spring, which lets us reach this checkpoint. Our goal is to traverse the conveyor belts, avoid getting spiked, and then get through the large rotating tunnel thing. It's possible to get across the conveyor belt to this point without jumping, but Sonic can't just roll up onto the next one. We also can't damage boost up because A, the spikes barely push Sonic back, and 2, every single one of these spike walls have no collision on the right column. I don't know why. I used just a single jump to get into the tumbler, and then continued on to the next section. For this part of Final Egg, we have to travel down a large cylindrical room featuring numerous floating platforms and flying enemies. While it's all the same room, there are death planes at the bottom of each section, so you technically have to do it all as intended. While playing on the GameCube version of the game, you can simply turn around and spin dash out through the tunnel, skipping everything, but since I'm technically on the Dreamcast version, the invisible wall is in place, so I actually have to go down sort of like normal. Well, normal for this challenge. There's lots of light speed dashing and hoping that the game doesn't just throw me directly down, because it has a lot. Through a lot of trial and error, I got all the way down to this point where a button opens up the floor, and then you have to go back up to a little elevator. I hit a roadblock right about there because I just couldn't quite manage to reach the elevator without jumping. Turns out, you can actually just clip through the wall and skip all of that. Nice. For the third and final act of Final Egg, we exit an elevator and are expected to traverse down, then up and down and down and up, and it's a whole thing. We don't actually have to do any of that, simply spin dash in this direction and jump. This gets us out and beyond this room's death plane, allowing us to fall for a few seconds directly to the end of the level, but turns out you can actually dash off of these stairs to propel yourself onto the elevator. Next, carefully step onto this back corner, which is technically like a little ramp, and then dash off. This gives you enough height and distance to get past the death plane, and thus skip to the very end, but without jumping. The last obstacle that stands in our way is Eggman and his Egg Viper. This boss has, I believe, the most health thus far. To take him out, we need to damage him 7 times. He has a few different attacks, but they're all fairly avoidable. After a certain amount of attacks, which changes depending on how much health he has, Eggman will stop in front of you, open the cockpit, and then move backwards and charge up a beam attack. If you damage him immediately, it throws you back towards your platform, but if you wait and then go across the bumps, it'll throw you to the other platform. You can use a light speed dash to damage him, but it doesn't throw Sonic anywhere. You just drop like a rock. You can't even do the jump attack afterwards.
Get a load of this! Get a load of this!
As such, the first 4 hits on Egg Viper require 1 jump each. After the 4th hit, Eggman will switch up his strategy. Instead of posing in front of Sonic, he will instead go to the side farthest from Sonic, pull out his spinning spike wheel things, and start throwing them at Sonic. The game expects and even tells you to jump onto the spinners and then attack Eggman. With lightspeed dashes, this would mean 3 more jumps, but we should be able to target him from the ground. The thing is, these attacks are basically impossible to avoid while charged up, because Sonic moves a bit slower with a charge. Also, getting hit removes the charge, and the spinners alternate their attacks so fast that you can't actually recharge in between. You can go under him, but if you go too far or wait too long, he will retract into his ship, at which point he is invincible. And then also after the 5th hit, he'll start destroying 2 sections of ground each time he emerges, so you only have so many attempts per life. After finishing my script, I had enough and I finally moved over to the GameCube version so I could at least try using save states, because I was doing this whole challenge thus far without save states at all. It's 4x3 and it looks awful in comparison, but the fight should work exactly the same as what I've been doing. Turns out, you can actually attack him from below. You just need to watch your spacing very carefully, as well as wait until he's over solid ground on the final hit. Otherwise, you'll just drop directly into the void while the game congratulates you on winning. If you were to do it right, you could beat him with just jumping 4 times and then watch Eggman sort of flail around before he explodes and we move into the credits. Now that we're finally here, I can answer the question, how many jumps does it take to beat Sonic Adventure 1? Turns out it's just
22
jumps. Not bad if I do say so myself. I wasn't sure if this game would make for an entertaining minimal jump challenge, but I think it did. Oh, it turned out well. Of course, I only covered Sonic stories, so there is more game in this game. If you'd like to see a video on that, or perhaps the hero story from Sonic Adventure 2, let me know in the comments below. That said, let's end things here and get to the outro. I'd like to thank my channel members for their support, and also give an egg carrier-sized thanks to Achilles Rhodes and Captain Crayfish for being super fans. If you liked this video and want to see more, I've done minimal jump challenges for the Banjo-Kazooie games, Super Mario 3D World, Bowser's Fury, and some others. I also have lots of Easter egg and glitch videos, but yeah. That said, leave a like if you liked it, consider subscribing if you want, all that good stuff. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.